Now, in what has been described as a dramatic move, the International Criminal Court has issued a warrant for the arrest of the Russian President Vladimir Putin. The court alleges that Putin is responsible for what it describes as the war crime of unlawfully deporting children from occupied areas of the Ukraine to the Russian Federation. In the seemingly unlikely event that Putin enters one of the court's member states, they are obliged to arrest him and transfer him to The Hague for trial. So to discuss this, I'm joined from Rome by the lecturer in international law, Dr. Maria Varaki. Good evening, Maria. Thanks for joining me. Can I begin by asking you about Vladimir Putin and what he thinks of The Hague? He surely doesn't recognise the jurisdiction of the ICC, so will this really make any difference?
Well, it was very obvious, that he doesn't recognize the jurisdiction of the International Criminal Court, and that's why he paid a visit already to Crimea and late last night to Mariupol. And that's why many people say that the arrest warrants from the International Criminal Court have only a symbolic value. I do believe, that it's more important, it's more than a symbolic value. Some people claim also that the arrest warrants have a moral value. I would say that the International Criminal Court sends a message to other people, a message of deterrence, that those particular behaviors, as you mentioned, the unlawful transportation of children from occupied territories is a criminal behavior, and that can be considered a war crime.
And the ICC believes that it has sufficient evidence that he has done this. I think they're suggesting up to 6,000 children. Is that persuasive?
Well, clearly, the prosecutor of the International Criminal Court had to explain it in civil terms, to persuade the judges that he has substantial evidence. So the judges acknowledge that there is reasonable ground that this particular crime has been committed, allegedly has been committed. The Ukrainian side talks of almost 1,600,000 people, kids who have been transferred to Russia. There is a vast number of children, and this is something that has to be investigated for sure.
So can I ask you about Vladimir Putin's position here? This, as you say, is a gesture, really, from the ICC. This is effectively them saying that they don't approve of Putin and that they're willing to take a stand against him. But it's also quite unprecedented, isn't it? I mean, there's been a few times where they've issued warrants for sitting heads of state. I think Gaddafi was one example. But generally speaking, they don't do this, do they?
Well, this is, as you said at the beginning of your reportage, it's a dramatic move. And clearly the International Criminal Court took a very, very unprecedented step here to issue an arrest warrant against the sitting head of state. But that has happened in the past. It has happened for Sudan. It's not the first time. In this case, it happened because we are talking about the president of a permanent member of the Security Council of the UN, and someone who is not a country that is not a state party to the International Criminal Court. So this is a very audacious step, I would say, on behalf of the International Criminal Court. My belief is that they have a very solid basis in order to proceed with that kind of move. On the other hand, the court sent a message, and we saw the reaction by President Putin, who visited Crimea and Mariupol, sending his own message back to the rest of the international community.
Do you think, Dr. Varaki, that there is a risk that this kind of gesture, however well-intentioned it might be, could escalate tensions, or indeed that Vladimir Putin might use it to his advantage to suggest that, he's put upon by the international community?
Yeah, of course, we have seen it already. The court has been described from the Russian side as a neo-colonial, hegemonic Western project. We have seen that, and of course, we expected that type of reaction on behalf of Russia. One of the main questions when we have an international judicial intervention, such as the one that we have from the International Criminal Court, is to what extent those arrest warrants can put at risk a possible peace process. What happens, to what extent we can have President Putin back to the negotiation table. And here, as I keep saying, we have to be very realistic, very honest, and very pragmatic, and to inquire to what extent there is a genuine belief and good faith on behalf of President Putin to bring himself around the negotiation table. So I don't think that actually the particular intervention by the court might derail or risk anything. I think, and this was very very obvious from the statement that the court issued that they said, they are doing it for deterrent purpose to send a message, to convey a message that that type of behavior is unacceptable and it's a criminal behavior for other senior officials.
Is it your view then that there is a diplomatic solution ultimately to this conflict?
Ooh, that's a very tricky question. Well, we are talking about illegal occupation. We are talking about annexation. Ideally, we would all like a diplomatic solutions, but there are so many things at stake, and both sides, they have issued so many important points. Both from Ukrainian side, they cannot accept the annexation of the eastern Ukraine, not to mention Crimea since 2014. So this is a very difficult and tricky question. We all hope for the best, for the future. This irrational war has to cease. We have so many victims for really no reason here.